Our speaker this morning is Beth Krom. Beth grew up in Western New York, the daughter of a television anchorman and a mother who was active in the League of Women Voters and felt somewhat transformed by reading Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique. Beth graduated from UT Austin with a degree in education of the visually impaired and taught for a few years before marrying her South African husband and relocating to Southern California as a new mother in 1985. She and her husband continue to live in Irvine, where they raised their family and where Beth served in elected office for 16 years. Experiences throughout her life have expanded her wisdom through lessons that all too often come with the unanticipated, unpredictable, and not easily navigated journeys we encounter. Beth has been gracious enough to share a bit of that wisdom and perspective with us today. Please welcome Beth to the pulpit.
I need the step. And I feel like I should say, I'm a short Jewish white woman. Thank you so much for having me today. I want to thank Peggy Thompson for personally inviting me. I've known Peggy for many years, and there are other friends in the room and new friends in the room. I also, I don't know if you sort of curated all of the other discussions today around me, but, you'll hear me discuss story in my remarks this morning. And I also wrote a book called Run Like You've Won, A Candidate's Guide to Developing a Strong Message, Raising What You Need, and Exciting the Electorate, and it's all about story. And so today I'm going to, Peggy's prompt was a lot of people in our community, and it goes without saying, a lot of people well beyond this community are concerned about the times we're living in and what we're facing. We have another natural disaster that's going to be coming this week. And there will be winds blowing that are just as potentially deadly. But, it is a time when we all need to be able to put everything into a perspective where we can feel hopeful and connected. So the title today is All We Control. The greatest lesson life has taught me is just how little we control. All we control are our actions and reactions. We have absolutely no power to control what other people think, do, or say. At best, we can influence. It's one of those lessons we all need remedial work on from time to time. I confess I did not understand that lesson for most of my life. I certainly did not understand it during my 16 years in political life. Had I might never have run. That's the thing. What we don't know often draws us to aspirational and ambitious aims in life. Great good is done by people who believe all things are possible, especially when those intentions are focused on achieving their goals and ambitions through actions and reactions they actually control. That said, it is what we can't control that often consumes our thoughts and upends us. We want to believe we can make the world bend to our will or cause others to act differently if we just twist ourselves into a pretzel. I was a pretzel twister. I also carried a perennial checklist in my head shaped by expectations I placed on myself, my husband, and my kids. There were always more boxes to check, and focusing on those boxes stressed me out and kept me looking beyond the moment rather than living in it. One never knows how the patterns of our lives are formed. I grew up a middle child. Any middle children here? You're my people. With an older brother and a younger sister in a Jewish family, and was raised in a working class suburb of Buffalo, New York, called Kenmore, in case any people from Kenmore happen to be here this morning. My father was in broadcasting, first doing radio news, but when I was about 7 years old, he became the television anchorman for WKBW TV in Buffalo. Over a storied 40-year career, he would take eyewitness news from a distant third-place position to number one, where it remained for more than 3 decades. My father was the most recognized person, not just in Buffalo, but throughout Western New York and Southern Ontario. In fact, for many years, he was the top-rated newsman in Toronto, Canada. Those were the days when people had antennas on their roofs and 3 main networks to watch. My dad's name is Irv Weinstein. He's gone now, but for as far back as I can remember, my identity was conflated with his. I was very proud of my dad, but having every introduction followed by, "Do you know who her father is?" can complicate things. That said, I have no doubt that growing up with a father who was reporting the news of the day during the 1960s and the 1970s, when so much was happening in America and around the world, influenced my perspective immensely. It's worth noting that my political life, with 7 campaigns and 16 years in public eye, presented my own kids with the same dilemma. We all think we're going to raise our children differently than we were raised. It doesn't always work out. It also meant a lot of time where my public obligations distracted me from the precious time I had with my kids. I would do anything to get some of that time back. I used to tell people that I might be the Honorable Beth Krom to everyone else, but my children reminded me they needed food, clothes, pocket change, and not to take myself too seriously. My dad did not have a traditional job or conventional hours. When I was growing up, if I wanted to see my father, I had to watch the news. I was in kindergarten when President Kennedy was assassinated and have a much keener memory of the Vietnam War than many of my contemporaries, because every night we ate dinner while watching the news on a small black and white TV in the breakfast nook. A lot of history unfolded during my growing up years. Assassinations, wars, social movements, from POW bracelets and Earth Day walks to getting my period the year Roe versus Wade was made law. My identity was forged in interesting times. My mom was active in the League of Women Voters. She used to take me to Common Council meetings, the city council meetings of Buffalo, and we went out canvassing for George McGovern. I had no designs for a political life when I was growing up, though I was involved in leadership in my youth group, and in retrospect, whenever I saw an injustice and someone being bullied, I spoke up. I remember encountering a Vietnam War veteran selling pencils in the business district of our little suburb. I couldn't have been more than 13, but it made me sad, and I remember telling him that he didn't need to settle for selling pencils, that he could still work and make a life for himself. This was before the laws that brought disabled populations into the mainstream of life were enacted, but we were on the cusp of progress in that arena too. I think about that when my husband, who was diagnosed with a degenerative neurological condition nearly 30 years ago, is able to navigate pretty independently thanks to adaptive technologies, curb cuts, and bus lifts that did not exist when I was growing up. When, as a teacher of the visually impaired, I taught Braille, I could not have imagined the advancements in technology that would make such a difference for the disabled and for the rest of us. I got my special ed and elementary education degrees from the University of Texas at Austin. I almost went to Michigan State. Anyone from Michigan here? Okay. But then I thought, some frosty February morning, I'm going to have to explain to myself how I could have possibly moved someplace where it gets colder in the winter than it does in Buffalo. Years later, as an elected official, I realized that a special ed degree can come in handy in politics, too. I never understood why I got... I'll give you a moment to think about that. I never understood why I got that minor in sociology in college, but politics answered that question as well. There is no better platform to study human behavior than in the political world. It's interesting how the dots of our lives come together. When I was doing my student teaching in a regular 6th grade class in Austin, one of my students was Scott McClellan, who would go on to serve as press secretary for George W. Bush. In fact, his mother, Carol McClellan, was mayor of Austin at the time that I was in Austin. Fast forward to 2006, when, as mayor of Irvine, I was invited to attend a speech by then-President George W. Bush at the Irvine Hyatt. As possibly the only Democrat invited, I asked the chief of police to accompany me. Interestingly, the topic of President Bush's speech was immigration. Things have not moved that quickly over the years. And that was almost 20 years ago. Following the speech, we moved down as people were shaking the president's hand. He had acknowledged me personally at the beginning of his remarks, so when it was my turn to shake his hand, and knowing he had served as governor of Texas, I leaned in and said, I, of course, reintroduced myself as the mayor, I'm a graduate of UT Austin, which clearly made an impression, made him happy. This was 4 days after Scott McClellan had announced he was resigning, but before he wrote his book about how he was lied to about the weapons of mass destruction and other predicates of the Iraq War. I then said to the president, in fact, Scott McClellan was a 6th grade student in the class that I taught in Austin, at which point the president said, Scotty's in the back. And he turned to the Secret Service agent next to him and said, take her back to see Scotty. As I walked the long hall, I reflected on how, after he was made press secretary, I told friends, having taught a unit on pond life during the time I did my student teaching, that it never occurred to me that little Scotty would become so enamored of the scum at the bottom of the Petri dish that he would wind up in the Bush administration, never imagining we would ever meet again. The Secret Service agent opened the door. Scott McClellan looked at me like, who are you? I quickly went through the connections of his 6th grade and the teacher. We spent about 2 minutes together, and I tried to help him reach back and remember Miss Weinstein. But it was over as soon as it began, not a lifelong relationship. But when I came back out to the lobby, people approached me with this quizzical expression on their faces. And then I thought about the optics in the room. The room had been set up in the round. I went, well, so everybody was watching the president work his way around. I went up to the president, I leaned in, I said something to him, and the Secret Service took me out of the room. You get the picture. It would have made a great human interest story in the Orange County Register, but humanizing elected Democrats was not part of their mission. Still, it's a great story to this day. We all have a story, and dozens of stories within that story. We carry the lessons our parents taught us and the lessons life teaches us, which are generally more painful. How we draw upon lessons learned can be the difference between overwhelm and despair or resilience and hope. One of the best lessons my dad ever shared with me is be nice to everybody on your way up because you're going to see them all on your way down. Fortunately, I haven't seen too many people on the way down, but that message served me very well throughout my life and, more importantly, in political life. One of my favorite political aphorisms came from Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, "Great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people." If you think about what we hear on a daily basis in the news and in the opinion sphere, we seem only to be talking about people today. We've forgotten about the value of ideas and even events. I think about this every day as the news medium my father was so proud to be associated with has become a circle jerk of opinionators who seem oblivious to any obligation to inform rather than inflame or educate rather than agitate. I always tell people there are three things essential to a healthy, well-functioning democracy: an informed electorate, a separation of powers, and an independent judiciary. I wish I could say that even one of these remained intact. But unfortunately, it's not the case. Interesting times, as they say. When I was approaching my 50th birthday back in 2008, I told people I never feared aging. I was convinced that life would be more interesting after 50. I would come to realize that the word interesting can carry many meanings. As 2009 approached, I completed my second term as mayor of Irvine, won a city council seat, and launched a campaign for Congress within a span of 4 months. Then the unimaginable happened. In June 2009, just a week before he was to graduate from UC Santa Barbara, I'll be fine. It hurts you more than it hurts me to watch me, not the event. Our son Noah, the middle child of our family, died from an accidental fall from the cliffs that separate the student enclave of Isla Vista from the ocean below, adjacent to UCSB. He was 22. Nothing prepares you for the death of a child. To endure such a tragedy in the public eye is another layer of complexity to navigate. We didn't have to notify anyone. It was in the local news. It was news in Buffalo, New York, too, where they reported that the beloved grandson of WKBW's former anchorman had died tragically from an accidental fall along the California coast. As with every accidental death, we searched for anything to help us make sense of it. But there is no sense to be made. And even 15 years later, there are a lot of unanswered and unanswerable questions. During my tenure in public life, I had met with family members frustrated by how bureaucracy was treating their requests for information. Now I was that person. I had been the mayor of a city that hosts a UC campus, a city that prides itself on its commitment to public safety, a city where the police worked in partnership with the community. What I encountered in my interactions with public safety and political leaders in Santa Barbara County felt like a culture of indifference. If there had been bubbles over their heads, the message would have read, "It's not the cliffs, it's the kids." Through my own research, I would learn that 6 lives had been taken by the eroding cliffs in the 20 years preceding Noah's death. What has been harder to endure is the 7 lives lost to the cliffs since Noah's death, despite my efforts to get attention paid to the clear and present danger of housing thousands of students in substandard housing proximate to eroding cliffs while celebrating a party culture that is legend at UCSB. What's good for the economy seems to be a higher priority than the welfare and safety of the student population that fuels it. Losing Noah made it hard to be a part of systems and institutions that are more focused on their own preservation than the best interests of those that they ostensibly exist to serve. That was 15 years ago, and while life has forever changed, therapy helped me find a way forward. I had never gotten therapy before Noah died, and probably would never have gotten therapy had I not been pushed by my daughter, our oldest, who is a marriage and family therapist. All the practice she got analyzing every single thing I said and did her entire life has prepared her well for a profession that she is definitely excelling at. I am forever grateful for her pushing me. I believe her exact words were, "Don't even talk to me until you get therapy." And to Noah for being my greatest teacher and spirit guide. I feel his enduring presence in my life. There are visitations and dreams, butterflies, hummingbirds, and other life forms. He seems to enjoy intersecting with me on walks in the form of those small lizards that dart across our paths. I have an awareness now that I did not have when I spent too much time relitigating the past and worrying about the future, when I thought someday was something I could count on, when I thought catching grenades in my teeth and twisting myself into a pretzel was an effective way to make things happen and change the world. Now I understand that all I control are my actions and reactions, that I have no power to cause other people to think, do, or say anything, and that expending energy to push against what I do not like or agree with I do not like or agree with, there we go, I should have put in a comma, will only deplete my spirit. I am not indifferent. I am just focused inward. None of us can ladle from an empty well. One of the Bethisms I developed to help me frame political life is, you can't make complicated people less complicated. You can just dilute them with better energy. We are the better energy, and our power is in focusing our energy on uplifting, upstanding, and engaging with a positive intention. In closing, I will share a theory I developed that should probably be published, please don't publish it, and seems quite relevant to what we are seeing today. In my experience, what divides us is not whether we're a Democrat or Republican, a liberal or conservative, a black hat or a white hat. I think all people can be quantified in a matrix of 4 boxes: me people and we people, and people with a sense of humor and people with no sense of humor. And then you cross-pollinate. I think you'll agree it's the me people with no sense of humor who are the big problem in the world. The truth is, there's a strong correlation between humor and humanity. Think of it as our ruby slippers. That reminds me of another Bethism for our times. It's not the Wicked Witch of the West that keeps me up at night, it's the flying monkeys. I'll let you meditate on that one. Before I finish, I'd like to share a verse I wrote a few years ago, but which seems even more appropriate today, given the times we're living in. All we control is how we react. Our choices, our actions, that's simply a fact. We cannot control how others behave. If they choose to be cowards, we still can be brave. If they choose to be callous, we still can be kind. If they game us or play us, we can quiet our minds. We can catch their grenades without throwing them back. We can just walk away when they're on the attack. People who bully, who bruise and abuse you are damaged and weak, and the reason they choose you is because they don't have a strong heart or a soul. They are insecure people who need to control out of anger and fear with aggression and pain. They need victims. It's sad and so hard to explain. Why some are so hollow, so devoid of self-worth, that they choose to spend all of their time on this earth causing chaos, destruction, hurting others for fun, some with words, some with fists, some with knives and a gun. So each day I am grateful I was loved and embraced, given courage to deal with whatever I faced, taught values that helped me appreciate others, open my mind, not judge books by their covers. And when I must deal with someone who's mean, manipulative, hostile, somewhere in between, I think, what amount could you pay me to make me act as they do? And the answer comes quickly, for it simply is true that there's not enough money, no compensation that's worth spending each precious day that one has on this earth, doing damage to others through anger, aggression, letting insecure feelings, self-loathing, depression, make me act like a bully or cause suffering and pain. What drives people to do this is hard to explain. Needing others to suffer to make yourself feel good, Would you ever choose that? I know I never would. In life, there are few things we truly control, but life can be guided by a positive goal, a hope, aspiration, a vision, a dream, to believe, to have faith, to go forward full steam. Acting with honor, showing others respect, being focused, ambitious, engaging, direct. We each have the power to shape what will be, to map out our ambitions, live the life that we see, touch others with kindness, overcome and prevail. Even when life is hard, we do not have to fail. Life is a gift. Make the most of each day, how you think, how you act, what you do, what you say, where you go, who you meet, the connections you make, the memories you store, the chances you take. Are the legacies left when you're no longer here? How you're remembered to those you hold dear. Make the most of the time that you have while you're here.